My name is John Chodacki. I work at California Digital Library at UC Office of the President, and I'm here to talk about COMET, the Collaborative Metadata Enrichment Taskforce, which is a project we've been working on for the past year. Really what we're trying to do with COMET and what we want to do with this session here today is to introduce a nuanced discussion about something that we all love and need, persistent identifiers, and some of the challenges that that ecosystem still needs to address. So the conversation will get into areas of critique and nuance and persistent identifiers. At no time are we were saying that PIDs are bad. It's quite the opposite. It's that persistent identifiers are something that need a lot more attention in the nuance and around the upkeep of metadata. So we're trying to get into those that are new to the topic. Please don't take this discussion as something that is hypercritical. It's actually the inverse. We're trying to be very constructive. But we want to start with the fact that this isn't just a challenge, this is a problem that we have, which is that while persistent identifiers and the metadata that underlie persistent identifiers are essential to research discovery, to our work in libraries, we have a systemic problem with the way that persistent identifiers are managed. We all know here persistent identifiers at some level, so things like DOIs, ARCs, ORCIDs, RORs, these types of identifiers, right? These are integers that are attached to resolvable URLs, allow people to mint or create new identifiers, attach metadata records to them, and then that information then flows through the ecosystem freely. It's kind of generally what we're talking about when we say the word PIDs or we say the word persistence identifiers. We're talking about those types of records, right? So the way that ecosystem works is some group, many of our universities, many of us as people, we create those persistent identifiers, we attach metadata to them, and then that is how that information makes it out into the ecosystem. And the way that PIDs deliver value is not just through that integer, it's not just making a marker that the world then has as a reference point, it's also around the quality of the metadata that underlies that identifier. And the research community as a general uses this metadata. It's not just the mentors, right? We don't just create individual records and then consume them ourselves. They are broadcast out to the ecosystem. And right now, that ecosystem is disconnected. The person or the group that creates the persistent identifier is different from those that are consuming. There's obviously overlap, but what ends up happening is that over and over, the improvements and information that happens within the persistent identifier ecosystem.
That's cool.
I thought you were pointing like something was wrong. I was like, well, actually, something is wrong. This is the problem. Yes. So, I can't take credit for this. Actually, my colleague Adam Buttrick put this together. It is cool. It just showcases that we are all creating metadata, but we're not always upkeeping it. We create high-quality metadata outside of the persistent identifier community and ecosystem, and we don't have it come back. And this is just an example of DOI example. Again, not to pick on DOIs, not to pick on anything. This is not a specific critique of anything. It's just trying to create context about the entire problem. So what we're trying to do with the COMET task force is really to address this head on. Say, okay, we understand the nuance. Many people have tried this before. People have talked about cleaning up metadata forever, and it's not a new topic. We're not trying to act like we're creating something that is necessarily unique historically. What's unique is bringing people together that understand not only the problem, but also the promise, and thinking about how we can build towards collective tooling that not just focus on academia and academic use cases, but really thinking of the full ecosystem beyond the people who are consuming and people who are creating persistent identifiers and their metadata. So one of the real challenges that we're trying to address through the COMET project also is trying to find to have a place where people can start to see and have a vision for the future. So as I was saying, we have this problem where we end up where improvements are happening outside of the mentor ecosystem. And so what ends up happening right now is people cannot visualize options. What ends up happening, which I think this is very much the discussion that was happening yesterday about open library metadata, is that we as libraries, bibliometricians, researchers, just you and your reference manager. You are constantly taking information and you are cleaning it up, and you are now enriched silo number, letter C or D or E. We all have better information that we manage on our own. And so why is that a problem? It's a problem for many of the reasons you would assume. But it's also a problem because it creates a dead end in what we can visualize as a future, right? We don't see that there's any other option. When all you see is the metadata that comes in as a snapshot and it's not getting better, and you're the ones who has to manage it on your own, either your organization or the person, you don't have a way of thinking about what else could be. And so what we did with COMET is we said, let's start with this promise, this idea that says we can change this. We can build a shared system where we can collect and validate and include the community's enrichments in the PID metadata back doing the full round trip. So obviously it's a complex idea. It's not something that just is going to happen overnight, but it's something that once you start to articulate that the option is there, that the vision is there, that you can start to say, okay, well then let's start to tease it out and figure out what is needed to get us there. And so the COMET model, in general, is the idea that through community-based rules or validation, we would start to create those tools, that round trip, the pipelines that happen. And again, I know many of you could be skeptical, saying, "Wow, that sounds it's a lot easier when it's a nice graphic on the slide." But we also know that this type of a model has worked. So for those that are not familiar, there's a project called ROAR, which is the Registry for Research Organizations. It didn't exist 6 years ago. The way it exists is exactly this type of model, where a group of people got together and said, this hasn't happened. Why not? Let's talk about what needs to happen. And the actual curation pipelines that we employ at ROAR, which CDL is a partner on, is exactly this model. It is where the community brings information in. We have a curation pipeline. We have a small team that actually helps centralize that. And we bring it back and round trip it directly back into the ecosystem. So this is happening right now. It's a different use case, but it's the same idea, same type of process that we know can happen in this use case as well. And so thinking about community-wide validations and visibility is really around not just getting people to tell you that they've done really smart, interesting enrichments. It's also about decoupling those enrichments from the original ecosystem and then finding ways to couple them back in. So at a very conceptual high level, you're talking about if someone says something better than what was in the original metadata, finding a way of storing that somewhere, making sure that it's been validated, that there is some level of trust indicators for the community to understand how that validation happened, and then for that information to be available at the same time as the original metadata retrieval could be. So you're trying to find ways to decouple and then recouple that information back into retrieval or information. There's also the hopeful expectation that information then actually makes it back into the authoritative source. So you're talking about how do you get DOI registration agencies or ARC mentors to be able to put that information back into their metadata records. So this is the COMET model at a high level, and what the COMET task force did is bring together a group of community stakeholders to discuss this, to write it down. We started with Force 11 last year in LA. We went to the Paris conference for open metadata, which is a part of the Barcelona Declaration movement, talked with people around what are they trying to do to build their own open science monitoring type ecosystems. Which again is very much the same ecosystem, trying to take really openly available information and trying to make it better and enrich it for their own use case, and talking to them about how do we then possibly build pipelines to bring that back into the PID ecosystem. So we had 80 people in the task force. It ran from September of last year until last month. We mapped many of the challenges that you can imagine. I mean, this is not a simple project. We're not naive. We went through not only product definitions, but also what would the governance structures be? What do we as a community want out of the governance of something like this? What do we as a community want out of the technical pipelines? And we talked about we took a use case around affiliations, and we ran it through the entire concept, and we published that up on the website for people to really be able to visualize what is it that is possible. And where we are now, as of 2 weeks ago, is we are in our community call to action phase, which is trying to look for interested parties who have either tackled this on their own, see the need, would be interested in the governance, understand that there's a challenge and an opportunity. Those that have financial or resources they can donate in, or those that are just wanting to be involved in the community. And we're asking for them to go to the website and enter information about what kind of resources that they have available, and bringing together those groups into the beginning of an organizational structure, not saying it's a new organization, but some sort of structure that can help manage and triage the next steps. We, from the very beginning, have talked about how the proof is going to be in the actual implementation, of course. So we've already started on demonstration cases, and we've already secured some funding to help us with those demonstration cases. So we're not a task force that is going to be kind of fizzling and going away. We already have next steps. We are interested in bringing together people who have created enrichments and have also seen the promise of that being round-tripped back to the authoritative PID sources. So just to kind of sum it up, I mean, what we're talking about here is, in many avenues, we have metadata that's cleaned up and it's put somewhere and it's used. There's a place, and that is what this community definitely needs to do. What we're looking for is people and groups that then have the capability or the vision or the ideas of how that information could and would make it back to the authoritative PID sources that exist out there. And if you are interested in that, and that's something that's of interest to you or your communities, those are the groups that we're looking for to talk to us in the call to action. So what is next steps? So as I mentioned, we've done some of the legwork already, convening, articulating, bringing people together to discuss this, doing the kind of hard work of working groups of just, herding cats and getting things written down. And we're now in that community call to action phase. So our pilots that we're looking at are really interested in specific use cases. So the idea of enriching all PID metadata is a big one. We're not going to start there, of course. We're going to start with specific use cases. So for example, why is it that a preprint server that shall not be named, that we all really love and care for, has really poor affiliation information? However, all of us really want to know how many people from our organizations publish at that preprint server. Why don't we use the algorithms that we all have within our systems and that we know exist out there to build a better affiliation matching service for that preprint server and publish it out so that we can all have a better understanding of who publishes there? That would be an impactful thing that gets us closer to not only having better metadata within the DOIs that preprint server uses, but also starts to prove out to each of us the promise of this kind of model and how, if we work together, we can make a better ecosystem. And we are focusing early on DOIs, not because we're trying to pick on DOIs, but because it's an ecosystem we know has a lot of tooling around it and that we can do faster, more iterative demonstration cases. But we've been very clear that's not where we want to stop, and that's not the point of the pilot of the task force, was not to focus specifically on DOIs. It's really around how do we create something tangible for the first steps. So if you're interested in this, also if there are pilot projects that you have that are in the DOI space, that's another parameter. Would be great to hear about. So pilot projects are not just demonstration cases for how to make cleaner metadata. They're also about how could we potentially run this? How could we govern it? We're not just talking about piloting technical infrastructure. We're also wanting to pilot the people side of things. For example, with the ROAR project, we went through a consultative phase. We talked to people about how it might want to be governed, and we iterated until we found a way towards how ROAR is structured now. that was part of a process that took multiple steps. It wasn't something that we immediately jumped into. And I know most of the projects we work in, it takes multiple times for us to get it right on how the community can see the governance as a success and really be able to participate in the governance. And so we're wanting to also think about structures around the steering committees, organizational structures, and really make sure that regardless of what kind of in-kind contributions or funding that comes in, we're able to not see this as a grant project or a short-term funded project, and really see it as one that the community is coming together to administer and govern. And so how can you help? Again, what I was mentioning is there's a community call to action. It's up on the website. Our website is cometadata.org. Up on that website, there's also all of the documentation that we've created during our consultative phase. You can see the articulation of what the working group and the task force came up with in terms of governance ideas, technical ideas, demonstration cases, implementation scenarios. And we've also archived all that up on Zenodo. But also, it's hard to get the word out. So if you know of groups, mailing lists, anybody who you know is interested in this type of an idea, the specific idea of focusing on PID metadata and the round tripping of getting quality information back into PID records, please pass it along. Send it out, contact us. We really want to make sure that we're not building this, from scratch. We know that a lot of people had similar ideas, and we want to learn from those and bring those people into the circle. Also, as we move forward with pilots, we plan on putting more and more things throughout the summer out. So just staying informed and seeing not just the limited examples within those demonstration cases, but the bigger promise of where we're headed. And so to make that happen, of course, we also need resources. So again, in the ROAR example, the reason why ROAR exists is because of in-kind contributions from CDL and DataCite and Crossref, and financial support from all of you through SCOS and ORCID and other places have really helped create what ROAR is. It's not free. And so we're trying to find groups that are interested in that kind of contribution as well. It's by no means the only way that you can contribute, but if you do have that ability or if you have that interest, please let us know as well. And also, if you don't have that ability and you're still interested in being involved in just brainstorming ideas, or you've had ideas in the past, we still have time for that input to be incorporated. So with that, I say thank you, and I think we have time for some questions and comments at the microphone.
Hi.
Hello.
Bridget Ellis from Lyrasis. So question, in terms of technical infrastructure, are you envisioning that COMET's going to build the technical infrastructure to actually do that collaborative curation? Or what is the technical infrastructure you're envisioning under the scope of what you're proposing?
Yeah, so everything is subject to change. So, but currently the model that we're looking for is yes. We're looking at structures that are in the open, so either like GitHub based or just collaborative, like just natively open structures for people to see and have a transparency into curation processes. Again, we're borrowing from the ROAR model, which right now, if you're not familiar, you can go and not only submit requests for edits or additions to ROAR, but you can also go in and see through GitHub interfaces for all the records and their changes from the past. So we're trying to envision, like we're trying to build a system where we're envisioning something that is similar in scope, where it's not just about the curation happening. It's also about that there's the ability for it to be transparent and for people to build trust, not just from our telling them to, but from them seeing it from transparency. Yeah.
Hi, John. Lisa Cliff at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, but putting on my chair of the ORCID board hat. I know you know, our members can already write metadata to an ORCID record subject to the individual allowing it to be displayed. So very distributed curation, but this contribution model exists. So two questions. One is, are you anticipating also the kind of provenance markers that ORCID has on all of that data when it's contributed?
Yeah.
And then secondly, one of the things we've noticed is like it's work for ORCID members to not just have the data, but then actually send it to us.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you have in your task force thought at all about the sort of social structure around this that motivates this kind of collective, collaborative, like what do I get out of it kind of question that people have, because of course we all want to do the right thing, but we have this much time. So
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the first thing, the provenance markers, absolutely. We wouldn't be able to administer a kind of a crowd-based, community-based system like this or ROAR or anything if we didn't also ensure that people the trust indicators and that people being able to follow the trail of where the information came from. And also there will be conflict of information, right? I mean, not everybody's going to think the same thing. So being able to navigate those conflicts. So we have leaned heavily on the ORCID provenance model and others in the documentation you'll see online. I think that the answer or the response to the other question or comment is, I was just thinking in my job at CDL just last week, someone, which I'm sure you have all dealt with this similar consultation, comes up to me from a research group and says, where can I go and see all the stuff that everybody at UC Irvine or somewhere, has ever published or created? So, and the answer is, that's complicated. And then they go, why? You're a library. And then you say, well, it's complicated. And like, oh, you're really involved in persistent identifiers and ORCIDs. Isn't that going to solve it? And so it's like, we get into these conversations where the promise of what we're creating is exposed, that there's flaws in it. It's like, and so I think like there are, on the flip side, there are CRIS systems and there are profile systems and there are groups within universities that are curating information about their researchers all the time. There are grants offices that track outputs all the time. Institutions have that information. And so that is a challenge for ORCID, of course. It's a challenge for all of us, and it's a challenge for those that are not really in our ecosystem but on our campuses who are like, why hasn't this happened already? And I think that that's kind of the idea of this model, is to try to create consistent ways and pipelines for that to be, those wheels to be greased. It's not to say that it's not going to take work, but it's really trying to say that the information that exists out there is better in other places, and that getting it back into those persistent identifier communities then solves the next round of questioning.
Quick question. I celebrate this work, John. As you know, this is absolutely fantastic. Quick question. Are you working with DataCite on any of these in your modeling of this ecosystem? And I'd be curious to know where you think that's from.
Yeah, we're members of DataCite, which for those that are not familiar, you should be. DataCite is a membership organization. They're a DOI registration agency. They're focused on institutions and institutional use cases for DOIs. I am on the board, but the members of the task force are from DataCite, and they've actually been very influential in this process. They're partners with CDL and Crossref on ROAR as well, so they're very involved. One of the reasons why they're very involved is also because, again, not to pick on anybody, but just to be honest, repositories that are members of DataCite have historically not been great about updating records. And so for DataCite, they're really interested in this as a way to help their own community update and create more value within the metadata records within DataCite. And so DataCite specifically has been very interested in this as the future of how they can make sure that they add value to the membership.
John, thanks for the presentation. Tom Kramer from Stanford University. The first question is a SOP, or a softball, I hope. Can you talk about what would the license status be of the data? Would this be open data, or would it be ambiguous?
It would be CC0.
Interesting. I think that's a good answer. The second question is, are you looking at a finite set of persistent identifiers, or are you looking at possibly an open-ended?
I mean, we've had that conversation within the task force, and I mean, the idea is that it's open-ended, but I think that that's, more just to conceptually not limit the kind of the imagination. The reality is what we're talking about is really around people, places, and things, and there's kind of a finite number of those types of identifiers that have communities around them where enrichment's happening. It's a little harder when you get into things like instruments or processes or methods or these types of things. So I think there is a limitation to what we would probably tackle, but it is one of the reasons why we are trying to keep some of our original demonstration cases to DOIs, because it is an identifier that's used for multiple use cases. So as we move forward, people's imagination can continue to carry into different communities. But I think it's the proof's going to be in where we end up. Yeah.
You're John. Christian DuPont at Boston College. You teased this a little bit by saying you don't want to just stop with DOIs. So
Sure.
make more mainly in the distinctive collections, special collections archives. Think a lot about identifiers. For some objects, we create locally minted handles that we use to manage things.
Sure.
Yes, I'm aware of ARCs. I'd like maybe to comment about ARCs in that space as well as persistent identifiers. But with DOIs, the limitation for the kind of work that we're doing is that we didn't create the object. We're not the publisher. We don't want to register a publisher. We may not even own the object ultimately.
Sure.
So the structure of the DOI type structure has some real limitations to it. And I'm wondering where you're thinking of taking it.
Sure.
Your registry. Okay. Enough. Thanks.
Yeah. So there are limitations with DOIs, and there are limitations with other communities as well. One of the reasons why we're starting with DOIs is because it is by design centralized, which helps us with building pipelines and thinking about it. It's also well adopted across repositories and publishers. So we've got a community where people are already leveraging metadata and could see value in enrichments. My team and the people involved in COMET love handles, love ARCs. By design, those are more decentralized, makes it more difficult for enrichments to potentially happen. I do have a side comment that if you'd like to discuss, that it is okay, everybody here, it is okay to register a DOI on a green OA content, even if it was published somewhere else. It is fine. DOIs are not just for publishers, they're for us too. But that's a separate conversation. I think that one of the things we're trying to do is break down some of these assumptions about what is the power dynamics of a DOI record or of a PID record, and those are definitely built into the comment that you just made around. Do I have the ability to influence this? Is this mine? Is this, and really try to change it into, no, there's now like a collective, this is our metadata, and we all have an ability to manage it and curate it together. So that's kind of the idea around the COMET model in general. Okay, I think we're out of time. Thank you, everybody.